to the next in the series of the National AgrAbility National Training Workshop virtual sessions. And just a few reminders for some housekeeping today. As you've probably heard, if you've attended these in the past, we ask you to please mute your microphone, rename your screen with your first and last name so that we know who's here, but also can call on you as we get into questions or refer to you as such. As you can tell, this session is being closed captioned at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, please drop those in the chat box. If you have not attended a Zoom session prior, if you hover your cursor down below or you on an iPhone any kind of mobile device, if you scroll down, there will be a pop-up menu down below and there's a little button there that says chat. Click on that and a box will pop up and that is where you can type your question as we move along today. We are going to have one area within this session where we're going to pause for some questions and then we'll also take questions at the end. As noted here, the session's being recorded so it can be referenced later. If you have to pop off midway through, you won't miss it. You can always refer back and catch the recording later. We will have an evaluation at the end of this session that we would like to get your feedback on. So please take a moment to fill that out. We'll put the link in the chat. It helps us and the AgrAbility national team continue to provide relevant and great information to you when and how you need it. So with that, we will get started. Today, we have two amazing folks with us today to share their expertise on caregiving. The first is Dr. Dee Jepson, and she's a professor at The Ohio State University and is the program director for Ohio AgrAbility. She also gives leadership to the OSU Extension Agricultural Safety and Health Program, dedicating the last 29 years towards occupational safety and health issues. Her education background includes degrees in animal science, agricultural education, human and community resource development, and a minor in public health. This combination has served her well in her professional involvement with the agricultural community. She has a personal involvement in farm life, living in Fairfield County, where she and her husband farm 1,300 acres of crops and beef cattle. Also today we have Laura Ackerman. She's the Disability Services Coordinator for Ohio AgrAbility and Ohio State University Extension. She is a two-time Ohio State University alum with degrees in English and Rehabilitation Services. She presents workshops on accessibility, gardening with arthritis, farming with a disability, accessible agritourism, and other disability-related issues for Ohio AgrAbility and OSU Extension. Prior to working at OSU, she spent 8 years as Disability Services Coordinator at Ohio Dominican University and 3 years in the vocational rehabilitation field. She grew up outside Sunbury, Ohio, and was active in 4-H in Delaware County. And with that, we'd like to go ahead and share the slides for today and get started. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for that great introduction. So let's see, I'm looking at the chat box. We have nearly, or the participant box, we have nearly 50 additional people joining us today. So thank you for spending your time with us on our topic, asking the right questions and finding the right resources for rural caregivers. That was a great introduction. My name is Dee Jepson, and Laura, you'll be able to hear from her here in a few slides from now. So unless, Laura, you have some opening remarks that you would like to share.
Just thanks to everybody for joining us. It's nice to see everyone virtually.
It is. So our objectives for the day and kind of where we see this program going is on this overview. We have started a caregiver support network in the state of Ohio, so we'd like to share a little bit of information about that, but also some additional national resources of where you might find resources that equate to what we have here in Ohio in your own regions. And then we will also share all of the materials that we have today on our AgrAbility website. And on that website, Laura, I've already advanced pretty fast. You're going to find some fact sheets and statistics. You'll find some of our caregiver videos and our handouts and some other caregiver resources that we have accumulated. and we try to keep that current. Actually, Laura does a great job keeping that current. So if we could get to slide number 4. We have a poll question before we even get started to find out really who's in our audience and how you currently work with caregivers. So you have a variety of choices here, and you can select the best answer of I do not work with this audience. I help identify resources when someone requests them. I have worked informally with caregivers, or I have coordinated programs for caregivers. So we would like to see what level of caregiving support you provide. And we have about 60% voted. So everybody who's able to vote, please vote. We have about 10 more seconds, please. And some are still coming in, so we're going to allow these last couple percents to register before we share the results with you. All right, I think we've just about saturated. Oh, 2 last people jumped in. All right, so here's going to be the poll results. I'll just share with you very quickly, just so you can see where you rank. That the most is that I identify resources with someone as they request them. We have a few that do not work with the audience at all and informally, and very few that have already coordinated. So we'll do the best we can to share some of these results to your questions and get you started in the right direction. So we can advance to the next slide, please.
I think I need to stop sharing so that you can start sharing. So I'm going to do that right now. Or I'll
Okay.
for a second while everybody looks at it, and then you can, I think, share the word cloud when we feel like we're ready.
Is it possible, Laura, if we go up ahead 1 slide and then come back to this one? I just want to give the basic definition, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So we do have a fun little activity where we're going to be asking you questions, and it's going to be just a very simple 1-word type of response. So in this situation, it would be like, what adjectives would you use when I say the word caregiver? So if you've ever done a polling, universal poll question, we're going to play around with this today. Okay, so you're going to be in our audience. You will need to have a cell phone to text this information if you're a texter. And if you're not, I apologize. You can put your answers in the chat box and we will record those for you if you do not have the technology to play along. So with that preference being said, now Laura, let's go back up to the instructions.
There you go. I think you actually can do it from your laptop because there's the HTTPS link.
Absolutely. So you could either
paste that in the chat.
Laura's going to paste this into chat where you can just copy it very quickly, or you can text. And it's my name, all one word, D Jepson 111. So you'll be sending a text to D Jepson 111. Then in the message box, or I'm sorry, that's what you're texting. Oh, you're sending the number to 37607. I thought we were going to have the little picture of the cell phone on this one. So let me start over. You're going to pull up your phone and you're going to start a new text, and you're just going to text it. Instead of to a phone number, you're going to text to a number 37607. In the message box, you're going to type my name, D Jepson 111, no spaces. And you will be getting a reply back that says, thank you, you've just joined D Jepson's my session, basically. How are we doing if I could look and give me a thumbs up if those of you if you've got this text, or you're still maybe working on it.
And Laura did put the link in the chat. So if folks are sitting at a computer or laptop, they can click right on that and a window opens where they can type right in as well. And then we've got a few people dropping some words in the chat as well. Would you like me
Good.
to drop those into that word for you? Do you want me to drop
Sure.
those words in for
That
you?
would
Okay.
be, that would be great. And I'm glad to hear that it is working great on the PC. That might be easier than texting it, that you just go to that link. So I'm going to share my screen now. Laura, if you could stop share for a second, because I want you to be able to see the words that are starting to show up in our word art. So
And I
we're
have
starting,
captured those in the chat.
perfect. So we're starting to see overworked, helpful. As you know, all of your words will show up here. If you've typed a word, if a word appears more than once, it will continually to grow larger. So overworked in this situation is getting a lot of play. Loving, helpful, and assistant is there. Exhausted, compassionate. If you have additional adjectives, you can share those as separate texts or separate entries. So Laura, without me stop sharing, what's the prompt on our next slide for what is our next word we want them to start entering?
What are the benefits of being a caregiver?
So now your next adjective, and it can't be a phrase, unfortunately, it's an adjective of what is a benefit to being a caregiver. Do the best you can with a one-word answer. Blessings, invaluable, the benefits. We'll give this a few more minutes. Okay, it says that we've reached the maximum capacity for our document. So that's awesome. It's going to finish populating here. And we're going to screenshot this and add it to our presentation, because I think all of these words, all of these feelings are part of what our caregivers go through. It's what we hear within our own communities and within our own programs, that there's a lot of love, there's a lot of compassion, it builds relationships, it's important work that we do, but yet it is tireless. You feel a little bit like you're burnt out. It feels sometimes like you're even invaluable, that maybe what you're doing doesn't seem appreciated. But yet we have other words here that, you know, I'm being responsible, I'm being competent, I'm being I provide reassurance to those people that I serve. So for the most part, the bigger words of what we think about caregivers, the love, the compassionate, outweigh the exhaustion and the overworked that we often feel. So thank you for playing along. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can put our slides back up.
Okay, here we go.
And we were several slides in advance of this, Laura. A few more.
We had adjectives, then we had benefits, and then we had hardships, but we ran out of space in the.
We ran out of space. I think we have some hardships in there. So
Yeah. So our next one is resources.
And I've shared this, but I will give, here's our website, and we will put this also in the chat box, Laura, if you don't mind. That way, if you ever want to come to our website, we are at agrability.osu.edu/caregiver caregiver-support-network. And again, all of these resources that we have, we'll be happy to share with you. Okay, so the next slide, please. So who is a caregiver? I think most of us have a framework or an understanding of what is a caregiver: providing assistance to another individual who has a disability or other limiting condition, or a person who is suffering from an illness. Working in the AgrAbility project, we see many rural caregivers that face additional challenges that their urban and city counterparts do not have. Things like geographic isolation, gaps in the services and the delivery service system that they have, and even the unique needs of ag workers to go beyond the household and to be in the farmstead. So everyone who's part of an AgrAbility project really understands that this is these are even more unique caregivers, and so additional attention, we wanted to focus on them. You may have seen this quote before from our former First Lady, Rosalind Carter, when she says there are 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And we felt that, you see this a lot of places, and we felt that this is the essence of what we were trying to do with this session as well. We have all different types of us working professionally. And so at what level are you connecting to the caregivers? Next slide. There we go. We found this interesting graphic, and it really speaks to what we are feeling in the state of Ohio, and you may feel it as well, that within the last 5 years, caregivers have really increased across the United States, going from 43.5 million in 2015 to 53 million in the year 2020. Now, I'm not sure when they took this poll, at what part of 2020, but certainly caregiving in the year 2020 has increased for many of us based on the pandemic. But just think, 9.5 million additional caregivers in the last 5 years. And that is, to us, very staggering. So if you're not already working with caregivers, this slide really indicates that you might be headed in that direction. And if we're not already programming in this area, this slide certainly shows the magnitude of why we should be programming in this area. So the next slide, please. We have another poll question, and this is kind of getting back to that slide that we just saw. How prepared do you feel to coordinate a program, a webinar, or a conference for caregivers? So in this situation, you're able to answer, yes, I'm ready to go. Yes, but I need more ideas. Yes, I'm planning a future program for this audience. Or no, I am not in a programming role to offer programs on this topic. Meaning that last question, you're here to listen only, you're really not in a role to coordinate a program. So we know that there might be caregivers on the line, or we know that other professionals from disciplines that are not really out programming. So we wanted to give you a box to click as well. And the voting is still going. We have about 60% in. So if you have a chance to vote for one of those, it would be appreciated. How prepared are you to coordinate a program, a webinar, or a conference for caregivers? All right, it's been a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. We've got a few last minute people in there. So we have 17 people on the line that are not in the position to offer the programs. And We have, yeah, only 7 people said, no, I don't feel prepared. Everybody else is at some level of yesness. How about that? Okay, let's go to our next slide, please. So how can you help caregivers? Well, that's why you've probably logged into today's session. The first thing we feel that you could do is just have a list of resources available to offer. And then the second thing is just say, what do you need? Because none of us have like ready-made answers. And so I would even put the what do you need first before having that list. But if you thought through everything that you think a caregiver might want to have, and you have that on hand, that way when you ask, what do you need? You have that answer, or you say, let me get back with you. That's not something I have thought through. As far as holding the webinars and the workshops at your local events, a lot of times we are there just to share resources. Our program does not create a lot of the content. We find and connect the gaps to the resources that are needed from whatever the topic may be, whether it's a physical, medical situation, and where do I continue to find help? Or is it more of a social worker, caregiver, or is it true support that they need within their own community and where they can get information? And so we do a lot of invitation to local service providers and local vendors to be part of our caregiving support network, so that we have expanded our web of touches in the communities, and then we're able to share that to a person. The other great thing about helping caregivers is allow them to help themselves and to talk with amongst themselves. And so just meeting other caregivers, whether it's through our webinars, it's really difficult to do that online, but at least they get to see faces and hear questions that other caregivers can ask of us. And even though they may not want to ask the question, if somebody else did, they don't feel quite so isolated or alone. Now, when we're in person, these sessions really can go long, and you see the parking lot conversations or the conversations that happen in the hallway of just connecting those people to each other, that they feel some common bond without even knowing people's names. So here are some comments that we've received from some of the workshop evaluations. That today I learned that I'm not the only one that's going through this, and this is whatever our topic may have been of that day. And other one says, wow, other caregivers struggle. So again, it's how do we help caregivers with being so overwhelmed and saturated and still remain relevant and important to the person they're caring for and to themselves. So our next slide then talks a little bit about our peer support system and why Ohio AgrAbility is interested in the caregivers. We know that farming is a dangerous occupation, and that it does lead to the disabling conditions and limitations that are maybe not as prevalent in other general populations. We also know that in the country, we have less providers, we have less of an infrastructure and support that's compared to their urban counterparts. So we kind of take this holistic approach. If we're working with an AgrAbility farmer, we also want to be working with their AgrAbility family. A lot of times it is the entire family, and sometimes it's an entire community that has embraced this person. And so how do we provide resources and help share their quality of life and make that the best that it can be? One of the projects that we have a lot of interest in, and we get a lot of benefit as well as staff, is about our peer support network. And what this is we have opportunities 2 to 3 times a year to get our farmers together. And we try not to schedule that during inconvenient harvesting times or planting times or high haymaking times if out here on the east in Ohio time zone. But we put together some educational presentations. We give them a small program to rally around. But the important thing is that they're coming together on a topic and then many times Laura and myself and other staff, we wave goodbye and let them stay there even longer, whether they're in the parking lot talking or on a bench talking amongst themselves, or they go off and have their own conversations, because we know that's how, as humans, we're connected through storytelling, we're connected, and they're probably not even talking about anything that we did. They're talking about the weather, they're talking about crops, they're talking about their livestock. They might even be solving some solutions. But this peer support program is really valuable to us, and it's more than the health and wellness and caregiving topics. It's bringing people together to talk about whatever is on their mind. And a lot of times our evaluations are open-ended and say, what topic do you want to talk about the next time? What we learned through some of that, because we did try to introduce caregiving as a topic there, and we found that it was rather difficult to have these meaningful conversations about caregiving when all of the caregivers are in the room, and all of the caregivers may want to speak, but they don't want to speak out of turn, or they don't want to share anything embarrassing or frustrating in their lives. And so we found that through the peer support, that the caregiver topic was maybe not the best venue, but certainly it brought together a lot of the people who would be of benefit. So we would have then on our tables and in our materials, very subtle places of where you can get support. And some of the resources that Laura is going to be sharing with us, we gave them access to that in a very, nondescript type of way, that if they'd like to pick it up, it's there and it's support for them. Mental health is also an important topic, and Ohio received some funding similar to many other states for mental health. And so that information is starting to roll out as well, and being part of that caregiver support resources that we have. Okay, so on our next slide, Laura, this is a little bit more about our rural caregivers support network that we started out having when we as that thought process of how do we start building our web and our networks to really be helpful and to know what is needed. And so when we were thinking about what resources do we need, how do we engage with our community stakeholders and our partners, and how do we identify expert speakers to bring in, again, it's not information that we have, but it's more about what does Ohio have as resources or national resources or what have you. So we're sharing with you then today some of the how we kind of finagled and worked our way through this. It may not be the way you have done it. We'd be willing to learn from you as well, but we're going to share our story. So Laura, I guess I'm still on this slide too, right? We had our
this one.
I was going to say, I'm going to pass it here to Laura, but before we start sharing these resources, are there any questions? And you can just unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type it in the chat box, but we want to give you a chance. And I know we haven't shared much content yet. We're still kind of building the stage of where we are and how we got here. Okay, so hearing none, that's okay. Laura, why don't you tell them about how we started to address this a little bit more formally than our peer support groups?
Okay. So as Dee had mentioned, we would try to bring up a caregiving topic every time we had a peer support meeting. And it is really difficult, even if you've got a good sized room. You've got generally spouses on one side, and then you've got the farmers on the other side. But what really brought it out to me was after we'd had one meeting and we'd had a pretty good conversation, and one of the women had told a story, very funny about, and very real, about how, they'd had their bathroom retiled and it was totally accessible, and everything was tile. And then her husband, who probably weighs a good 50 to 80 pounds more than her, slid off his chair and he was naked on the tile floor, and she can't lift him up. And what am I supposed to do? Do I bring the kids? I don't even have anybody here. And we're all laughing. But just kind of picturing that if I was in that would have been terrifying. So a couple days later, another spouse that was there called me and said, why does everybody else have it together? I don't have it together. My husband doesn't need that kind of help with showering and things, but they're laughing and they've got it together. What's wrong with me? And I said, first of all, if that was me, I would also make it a funny story, because it was probably terrifying at the time and very upsetting and very stressful and embarrassing for both of them that he could not get back up. So when you're going to relate it, you're going to make it funny. Nobody has it together. Let's be honest. We all lose it at some point. I said, it's just the way you relate it. So please don't feel like you are lagging or are lacking. I mean, and this particular woman that I was on the phone with, her husband is she and her husband are two of my favorites. I shouldn't have favorites, but they really are. And he is so ornery. I mean, there are times I would probably want to leave him on the floor because I know the man. But I also said, it's not that. But then it was so hard to have these conversations. So in the fall of 2019, we said, I started here in 2016. I've just been over 5 years. And this was one of the things that Dee had given to me that first summer. We need to pull some caregiver things. So I kept looking at top 10 tips for caregivers, and it was all helpful, but it didn't go beyond that. So really, like summer of 2019, we started saying, we're going to hold a workshop. We're going to do it. And I reached out to some people that I knew. One of them is a supervisor for the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. He's got probably a 30 county region. So he had a big area. I met someone at a city council subcommittee. She's a fantastic presenter, a psychologist. I mentioned it one of our last in-person meeting, and she contacted me by the time I got back to the office and said, I would like to help. So that was where our speaker came from. And I just put out an email to my listservs, to people that I knew that looked at caregiving and elderly topics, and said, I want to put this together, but we need topics and we need speakers. And so that's where that came from. We also looked at, of course, I thought, well, we'll just have it at a Wednesday or a Tuesday in Columbus. And one of my colleagues, a dear friend who's a caregiver, said, caregivers can't get away. Because however familiar you are with Ohio, Columbus is pretty central. But it can take 2 to 3 hours to get to the far corners of the state. So realistically, 2 to 3 hours one way, 4 or 5 hour workshop back, not realistic. So we settled on a Saturday afternoon, and instead of having it in Columbus, we decided to have it at Columbus was the focus of it. That's where we hosted the speakers. We had Zoom based there, and then we had 6 satellite sites around the state. So I reached out to extension personnel. Again, working with our planning committee, we have a healthy aging team within our extension office. It's mostly from Family Consumer Sciences, and they identified extension educators around the state. They found sites, so we had them in county social services offices and extension offices. And I even had a NAMI office that stepped up the day before, because the person that was supposed to facilitate in the northwest corner, she had a really high fever and was really sick. I had to move a county over. I looked to see who had signed up, because when you were registering, you could select your site. So I looked to see who had signed up for the Northwest site, and there was a lot of people from NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, several people with that address. So I looked them up and I called and I said, hey, is there any way you could host this for? Of course. And he said, you sound really stressed. And I said, Eric, I'm so much less stressed now that you're on board. Thank you. So don't be afraid. I'm the youngest child. I have no problem asking for money or asking for help. Doesn't matter how old you get, that never changes. I had no problem reaching out and asking him. And they did a great job facilitating for us. We had about 145 people register for it. And then we'd also done exhibitors. So we decided, in addition to having the spaces, we wanted to have local exhibitors able to come to all of the sites and set up a table, pass out their brochures, talk to people. So I looked at my list, we had 25 to 30 exhibitors. A lot of them were in Columbus, which is the capital of Ohio. It's a big city. It's where OSU's main campus is located. But we had probably 2 to 3, maybe 4 exhibitors at each of our satellite sites. I didn't put prices on here, but we charged $10 a person to register. And then we charged the exhibitors $20. per table, which we thought was extremely reasonable. And it helped defray the costs of, we had some healthy snacks and water. Fortunately, all of our sites were free, which was very helpful. We even had free parking, which if you've ever been to the main campus of Ohio State is unbelievably rare. We had it off-site. It was maybe 5 minutes from the actual campus at an OSU facility, but that was very helpful because if people hear parking, they think, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to OSU. It wasn't there. So we made sure to put in our ad in our flyers that it was free parking on campus in Columbus. So I think that helped a lot. Little things like that you have to think of. So our first workshop, some of the things we learned, that technology is usually great. Even when you do a test, my colleague and I had gone Thursday night to the room we were using. Everything worked beautifully. It's a medical center building. So not sure what your campus is like, but at Ohio State, the medical college, the medical center, and the rest of campus have two totally different IT teams. Had not even occurred to us. So when we were needing help day of, we got bounced around quite a bit until we finally found someone in the medical center. We had no one from the medical center who could sign into the computer. We eventually got it sorted, but that's something to think about. Have a set schedule for the breakout rooms with the satellite sites. We got bumped off of our schedule, so we didn't give them enough time to say, hey, you've got a 10-minute warning till you come back. We were kind of abrupt with it. Another lesson learned. People really wanted more time with the exhibitors and more time for attendees to meet and greet. We'd allowed maybe half an hour, 45 minutes for the exhibitors. We had them set up in the back of the room. And then they could talk as long as they wanted at the end of the event, but we would do that. And people just like to get together. Dee had read those comments before. One of the comments we heard most was, I'm not the only one. And my father was in great shape until about late 2018. He had bladder cancer and he really declined very quickly, which I'm grateful for the quick decline, but still. My sister was what I called her the case manager. She ran all of it and I was her assistant case manager. So even as the assistant case manager, incredibly overwhelming. You feel like you're not doing enough. And even as a disability services professional who has a lot of public health colleagues and has taken classes in this, it was still an absolute mystery how to get a lot of things done. So it's very overwhelming. But it was really great for people to meet and say, I'm not the only one that struggles with this. And I think it doesn't necessarily solve your problem, but it makes you feel better about yourself and about the care you're giving. And I say have a mindful wellness activity. We had put that in as something that if you've done caregiving before, it can be very stressful. And I always think of when people say, what do you need? And there's times you'd say, I just want a hamburger and a shower. That's all I need. That's all I can think of right now because I'm too overwhelmed. So we'd put in the mindful wellness activity as a great way to remind people, this is just a 5-minute exercise where you just breathe and take a minute. It worked out really well because we were about 20 minutes delayed in starting it. So our mindful wellness person that was supposed to do maybe a 5 or 10-minute piece at the beginning, I said, hey, Sherry, can you do it longer? How long? Until we get this thing figured out. Okay, she did. So maybe have a little bit of an entertainment or some kind of an activity in case your technology is not perfect. Back one. So those were our lessons learned from the workshop. We held it February of 2020. So our plan at that time, we had at the end of February, I want to say about the 22nd. At the time, we were planning on having another one in maybe the summer in person, and then another one in November for Caregiver Appreciation Month. We all know what happened. Our second one was in February 2021. But when we were in person, we did do a caregiver workshop evaluation. We asked questions about the logistics, the speakers, the topics, what did they learn, list of topics they'd like for future workshops, which was extremely helpful. We gave them a list and then we added, gave space for them to put in their own topics. We asked for opinions about local sites. People really appreciated that they didn't have to go very far. Some of them may have had to travel up to an hour, but in general, it was probably less than a half an hour to get there. And that was really helpful because whether they were familiar with extension or not, they got to know what extension was and see what some of those things were that are in their very community. The evaluation boy, I'm twitchy. This is twitchy today. The evaluation is available from me upon request. You can just go to the website. Here, though, is the evaluation. I just put it in. You can see we had the Likert, great, good, fair, very poor. We did have some people that were not impressed with our technology, but they were pretty forgiving. This is before most people knew what Zoom was. So now I think they have a better idea of what it is. Most people were in person, like I said, but we had a few that joined by Zoom, and we were connecting with all the sites via Zoom. Here's some of the topics: nutrition and meal planning, giving care, recreation activities, etc. And then we had a small demographic section at the end right there. So again, if you would like this evaluation, just give me an email. I'll put my email in the chat at the end and get you that. So 2021, we've done a workshop. They've all been virtual on Zoom. On February 17th, we held one on respite, because after the year that we've had, again, I had a colleague, her name is Karima. She was primary caregiver for her father. She also works full-time, is married, just got married a year ago today, actually. But she was they had caregivers typically that would come in from outside of the home and come in and help. And they really had to limit that because her dad was very, very medically frail. So respite, just in general, 2020 was a year we all needed respite. We decided to focus on that. So our first session, it was about 90 minutes, about an hour of content, and then a very robust question and answer. We talked about finding respite and creating a respite care plan. That was presented by the psychologist I'd mentioned before, who I'm on a subcommittee with. She did a presentation last year on caregiver burnout. It was fantastic. It's on our website, the video, and quite a few resources that she created. She talked about finding respite and creating a respite care plan. The respite care plan is also on our website. The second session, we had an expert panel. We had my colleague Karima, who has a public health background herself, as well as having been a caregiver. We had another caregiver from, oh my gosh, I think it was the ALS Society. And then we had another professional from the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. So all of them, I believe, had personal caregiving experiences, but also talked about where you can find respite, how to vet, how to check up and vet people, caregivers coming into your home, different resources. Again, it was about 90 minutes. I think the panel discussion lasted a little over an hour, and we had an extremely robust question and answer and chat, people sharing resources. It was phenomenal. I gathered all the resources and put them on our website. So again, that's there. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug for June 9th. We're holding our next workshop. It's Generation RX, Safe Medication Practices for Better Health for Older Adults. If you don't know what Generation RX is, it's developed by the Ohio State University College of Pharmacy. And it's, I want to say, 6 or 7 modules for different age groups. Elementary school, high school, college, adults, older adults, and then employees. And it's age appropriate and age specific, and it has presentations. So if you or one of your kids or a colleague you needed a quick, really good presentation, you could go to generationrx.org. You could download one for the age group that you're presenting to, and you have slides, you have activities, you have quizzes, you have everything. So they have recently done, or maybe redone, their older adults module. So I invite you to that. I'll have registration information for that later. I believe it's June 9th, and I want to say it starts at 2 p.m. I should know I scheduled it, but I'm pretty sure it's 2 p.m. So some of the resources we have on the Ohio AgrAbility website, shared the website in the chat earlier, agrability.osu.edu. We've also linked to the National AgrAbility Project website. It's also linked there. So if you went into the National AgrAbility, the NAP website, to the resources page, and they have a caregivers link within that. We have all of our Ohio AgrAbility. You can link straight to our page from that. So this is just a picture of our webpage, Ohio AgrAbility. There's the quote from former First Lady Rosalind Carter. But you can see the Caregiver Support Network is in that top bar. We have, I'm highlighting here, the fact sheets, infographics, and statistics. Gonna see if this works. So I need to change so I'm going to take you over to the website and just do a quick run through on that. Can you see are you looking at my homepage right now? Thank you. It doesn't have the little green outline on it, which is a little confusing. So that's our caregiver support network page. That's our opening page. We've got some quite a few different ones. The National Alliance for Caregiving. I just found this last week as I was finishing up this PowerPoint, did some updates on it, but they have a great fact sheet for rural caregivers. So just to show you what's on there, they have it for caregivers of different cultures and ethnicities, different ages, a lot of different fact sheets, and they're really, really good. I can't take credit. It's AARP that did this, but I just want to share that. Caregiver videos and handouts. Once we have held a webinar, I put it up here. You can link to the YouTube video and watch the webinar. We have the Caregiver Respite Action Plan handout. This was developed by Dr. Teresa Young, and it's designed for people to print off and kind of go through talking about different respite. I can land on my feet. What gets in the way of seeking respite, which I think is a huge one. People, I just can't dump them somewhere. Everybody's so busy. And then it looks into, if I could get some help, these are the things I would do. I'd mentioned before, if someone said, what do you need? I just would have said, I need a hamburger to shower. I don't know what I need, because you're that overwhelmed. This kind of helps you to pull those things out of what you really do need. And then smart respite plans. So there's even more about that. She's got a lot of great resources. Wrong one. So that's just some of the resources we have available on that. 2021 caregiver workshops. That's the link up there. If you do want to, if you just go to AgrAbility, want to register, the webinars are free. You can register for the Safe Meds. And again, it will be recorded and archived for later. Go back to PowerPoint. Okay, so that was our website. And of course, we have a lot of great Ohio AgrAbility stuff on there that I did not get to show you, but please go look. We spent a lot of time on that website, so we try to have as many really helpful resources as we can. So we have another poll question. Are you prepared to coordinate a program, webinar, or conference for caregivers? Now that you've heard all this, we're hoping that your confidence level has gone up, or your interest level has gone up some. And I will say this, you do not need to be the expert. I have no problem whatsoever. Deed said it before. I'm not sure the answer to that question, but I'll find it. I think I would much rather say that than say, I don't know, and just leave it, because I and us, we in general are in a much better situation to where we know who we can reach out to, whether it's in our university or in our community, just by the nature of the work that most of us do. We have a lot of connections. We have a lot of great listservs, the AgrAbility listserv being a great one. There's so many wonderful things that come up. The work we do is so specific that sometimes we just have to turn to each other, but our colleagues have great ideas. We have different listservs within our university and within our college at Ohio State. And so I feel like I can pretty much always find someone to ask a question of, and if they don't know, they can direct me to the person.
I'd say we're probably ready, yes, to stop the poll.
So we got 32% that feel like they're ready, but they need more ideas. And then 21% that are planning a future program. And I'm hoping that some of the people who said, no, they're not ready, are feeling a little more confident. I don't remember the results from before, but there's a lot of ask for help, find experts. There are some phenomenal resources out there within our AgrAbility programs. If anybody from Wyoming is on, I will tell you, I really appreciated you were one of the first virtual webinars, virtual NTW webinars. And I thought your resources were great. And I shared them on our page, and I definitely gave you credit. But our AgrAbility colleagues and our extension and university colleagues and the area agencies on aging, I believe those are national, and they are unbelievably helpful. I know in Ohio, they have a speakers panel with a whole list of topics. So you could easily just contact one of those people. Could you come and speak on this? And you're done. Then you just got to do the logistics for organizing a conference.
So some of,
go ahead.
before we go to that, some question came into the chat box just now before we get to this next poll question. It says, did we do a needs assessment to decide what caregivers were needing and interested in the workshop topics? And
the very first one, we talked about it, and I had some specific ideas, but talking to colleagues who were caregivers and who worked very closely with caregivers, that's how we came down to burnout. That was one that everyone agreed. We weren't able to pull the caregivers, but we agreed that burnout, just, we know that's an issue. We also, at our first conference, it was burnout, it was telehealth. We were really ahead of the curve there. But I had a colleague from the Ohio Rural Health Association who runs a telehealth program, and he offered to do that. And I thought, that is helpful. I know that's kind of, I've been hearing some things about this, and boom, all of a sudden telehealth is everywhere a year later. And then our last topic was someone who was talking about gadgets and technology he was from the Department of Developmental Disabilities. So we thought, we think these are topics that will be important. We did offer, so needs assessment, we used the evaluation when we came up with the next topic of the evaluations from the workshops. What topics had they indicated they were interested in? And then again, Society and Life kind of spoke up and said respite is really important. So we did respite. And then I picked the Generation RX topic as the third one because Ohio has got the misfortune of being in the top 4 or 5 for overdoses, frequently from opioids. But we have, parts of Ohio have a really, really bad drug problem with overdose and use. And at the beginning of the pandemic, you didn't hear anything about it, but that's only because it was pushed out of the headlines by the pandemic. Now that things are kind of settling in, they're saying it's worse than ever. So that's why I picked Generation RX. So it was a bit of a needs assessment and a bit of what is society and the headlines telling us we need.
thank you, Laura. And earlier when we were in our peer supports, we would ask them what they would need, and the caregivers say, oh, we'll just attend whatever you put together for us. So,
Yeah.
We would hear them talking, and so I think having a couple of these under our belts, we have a little bit more information, but I think they also needed just to attend a few before they knew what to ask for. But that's a great question.
It can be very overwhelming. Again, it can be overwhelming to know what you need. My colleague from Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities really, 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 really wants to do a seminar on like benefits, which I thought, my God, that could be a full 40-hour week of workshops, and I'm more than willing, but that's so specific. One thing that I would like to do that I have brought up before that I kind of wanted to do, I've gotten several questions from colleagues in Ohio, and I think I put it on the AgrAbility listserv. So my grandpa, my dad, my spouse has Parkinson's, he has dementia, he should not be driving. Let's just say he should not be driving. The doctor said you can't drive the car. He's still driving a combine, a tractor, another huge piece of equipment. How do we do this? And so that's something that I really do want to address soon, possibly this summer or fall, because I've heard it from 3 or 4 different people, and they've reached out to me, which makes me think there's a lot of other people. And we did go through that with our dad, and I handled it very, very badly. I just took the keys away. He made him very angry, but when you stop moving and you fall asleep, you have no business driving. And it was really hard for me to tell the man that taught me how to drive, you don't get to drive anymore. And I see that there are a couple of people said we need that topic. So yeah, Chandra, I'm going to be maybe reaching out to you. If anybody has any information on that topic, that's one thing that I do want to come up, because I feel, Ned, I think Ned did send me his, thank you, Candy. Yeah, so that's something that we do need to talk about. Not so much vehicles, maybe vehicles, but I would really be interested in farm equipment. How do you tell them to stop doing it? Because yeah,
a lot of times that is their livelihood on the farm, and you take that away, then they feel that sense of isolation. And so I think we can learn from some of our city and urban counterparts because us in the country, that is the way to keep them going. But I think we have a lot to learn ourselves.
Yes. So we have one last poll.
Yep, one last poll question, if that could be launched. What have you learned today? Select any of them that apply. So it is multiple choice. You can select more than one. I've learned about possible topics. I've learned where to find resources. I thought about a new collaborator. I'm hoping someone here on this network or this Zoom call will help collaborate with me on a caregiver program. I learned that I'm in totally over my head. And I feel, or you could be the other way. And I was like, I'm totally ready to have a program now. So we're interested to hear where you land on this spectrum. And if you could all just take a minute and get back to your computers and take a vote, we would appreciate that.
And please look at our website. There are a lot of resources. I've broken them down because it would have been probably 20 pages if we printed it off. So I tried to break it down by bigger topics: mental health, dementia, caregiving from a distance being a big one, because I think that's very much been a reality when everybody was locked down. But I think that's a reality even without a pandemic. I'm going to move to the next slide. Keep the poll up, but I'm going to just share our contact info, and you can also contact us through the Ohio AgrAbility website.
Ooh. All right. And then as the poll is just wrapping up here, we'll allow you also to unmute and share some personal stories or personal questions. So at any time, we're ready to take your verbal and your in your chat box kind of questions.
Any last minute thoughts or questions? Thank you so much to both of you. That was amazing. And there's your poll results, huh?
Good.
I'm seeing that it popped back up. Well, thank you to both of you. If Laura, if you can stop sharing real quick. I will just share real quick here. And let folks know that thank you to Dee and Laura. That was amazing. Thank you for all the resources and information. I think we're all processing that, and we'll be checking out your website more as well. So Tess shared the evaluation in the chat. If you could click on that and give us your feedback, we'd greatly appreciate it. As I mentioned at the start of this webinar, it helps the National AgrAbility team determine what types of webinars and information resources are relevant and timely for all those who are engaged. Always keep in mind that these are recorded. There's a link that you can go to on the National AgrAbility site to check out all the previous recordings, and there's a wealth of information there. Next week, a session coming up is Improving AgrAbility Relationships with Vocational Rehabilitation. Same time and same link. So if you've registered for the series, you can use the same link and we will see you next week. Any last minute thoughts? If not, have a great rest of your week and enjoy the Memorial Day weekend coming up.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for presenting, Dee and Laura.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And I will send you copies of those poll results so you can put them into your slide presentation.
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We will upload our Word document and get that back to you, or our word art graphic. So.
Sure, no problem.
That was a lot of fun. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. All right, and I'll stay on a couple more minutes if people are still needing to access the evaluation link in the chat box. But other than that, thank you, everyone, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
You're still recording, but you probably already know that.